My sister stood near the stage with the kind of calm smile that only comes from believing everything is under control. She had planned this night carefully. The guest list was full of people with money, influence, and sharp eyes. She knew exactly how to make a person feel small in a room like that. When she called my name, her voice carried just enough sweetness to fool everyone except me. A few people turned to look with mild curiosity. Others looked amused before I had even reached the microphone. My dress suddenly felt too plain, my shoes too cheap, my body too stiff. I could feel judgment moving across the room before I made a sound. My sister stepped back and folded her arms, ready to watch me fail in front of everyone she wanted to impress. For 1 second, I almost gave her what she wanted. I almost let the fear close my throat. But then I looked out at the crowd and felt something inside me settle. I had lived through worse than a silent room and cruel eyes. I lifted the microphone with my good hand and took one breath. The music began softly behind me. My sister was still smiling. She had no idea that this was the last moment she would ever look down on me with certainty. We grew up in a small town where people noticed everything but rarely understood anything. Our house was always busy in quiet ways. My father came home tired, smelling of dust, metal, and engine oil after long workdays. My mother worked near the window with fabric spread across the table, measuring, cutting, and sewing until late evening. Nothing in our home was fancy, but everything was earned. I learned early not to ask for much. I helped where I could, stayed out of trouble, and tried not to make my parents worry. I was the kind of daughter who washed dishes without being told and listened more than she spoke. My sister, Aloan, was different. She moved through life with ease, as if attention belonged to her. People remembered her laugh, her clothes, the way she could make any conversation turn in her favor. I stayed in the background, and most days that felt easier. The only time I felt fully myself was when I sang. I sang while folding laundry, while sweeping the porch, while standing alone in the kitchen after everyone had gone to bed. Music gave me a place where nothing about me needed to be explained. But Aloan noticed that too. And somehow, whenever she saw me love something, she found a way to make it feel unsafe. As we got older, Aloan became more careful with her cruelty. She stopped saying harsh things where others could hear them. Instead, she waited for private moments, when no one else was around. That was when her words changed from teasing into something colder. She knew exactly where to strike and how to make it seem small enough that I would sound oversensitive if I complained. Sometimes she would glance at my hand and smile in a way that made my stomach tighten. Sometimes she would say I should be grateful for pity because admiration was never going to last. She had a talent for making pain sound like honesty. I usually said nothing. Fighting with her only made me feel more exposed, and silence seemed easier than giving her more reasons to enjoy herself. The hardest part was how easily she shaped other people's opinions. She spoke about me as if I were fragile, needy, and always on the edge of hurt feelings. She made it look like she was the easy one and I was the difficult one. People believed her because she knew how to stay charming while doing damage. After a while, I stopped wondering whether she meant it. I understood that she did. Whatever warmth should have lived between sisters had turned into something hard, and it was already changing the way I saw myself. When I married Thayer Bell, I thought I was stepping into a quieter life. He was steady in the way some men are without trying to impress anyone. He fixed what was broken, spoke only when he had something worth saying, and never made me feel like I had to earn basic kindness. Our home was simple, but it felt safe. For the first time, I could move through my days without waiting for someone to turn my weakness into a joke. Aloan's life went in the opposite direction. After she married Blaine Arledge, everything around her became expensive, polished, and carefully displayed. She entered rooms full of wealthy people as if she had finally reached the world she believed she belonged to. From the outside, it looked like she had everything she wanted. I told myself we no longer had to compete because our lives had become so different. I was wrong. She still found ways to pull me into her space. Whenever I visited, there was always a comment hidden inside a compliment. She noticed my clothes, my manners, the way I spoke, and made sure I noticed that she noticed. Even when she asked me to sing during family gatherings, it never felt like real admiration. It felt like she was placing me where she wanted me, reminding everyone that no matter how far life moved us, she still believed she could direct the scene. A few years passed before Aloan called me with what sounded like a real offer. Her voice was warm, almost sisterly, and that alone should have made me suspicious. She said a singer had cancelled for an important private event and asked if I could step in. She spoke as if she finally respected what I could do. I wanted to believe her, even though Thayer looked at me the moment I hung up and said the whole thing felt wrong. I still went. Some part of me kept hoping that time had changed her, or at least made her less interested in hurting me. But the second I entered the venue, I felt the truth. No one was expecting me in any real way. The musicians looked annoyed, not prepared. The staff moved around me as if I were a last-minute problem. When I asked about the music, I found out the songs had been changed. No one had thought to tell me. The room was filled with polished guests, expensive clothes, and the kind of quiet judgment that never needs words. Standing there, I felt plain and unready. Then Aloan walked me forward and introduced me with a smile that was too smooth to trust. She made me sound like an amusing surprise, not someone meant to be taken seriously. That was the moment I understood. She had not called me there to help her. She had called me there to watch me fall. When I stepped onto the stage, something inside me changed. A moment earlier, I had felt exposed, awkward, and deeply alone. But once I stood under the lights and faced the room, all of that began to fall away. I stopped thinking about my dress, my hand, my sister, and the people waiting to judge me. I focused only on the music. The first note came out stronger than I expected. It cut through the room so cleanly that the whispering stopped at once. I kept going. Line by line, I felt myself settle into the song. The room that had seemed cold and distant suddenly felt still. People were no longer watching for a mistake. They were listening. I sang with every part of myself that had been pushed aside for years. I did not hold anything back. By the time I reached the end, the silence in the ballroom had changed. It was no longer cruel. It was stunned. Then the applause started, loud and immediate. I stood there trying to catch my breath when a man stepped toward me from one of the front tables. He introduced himself as Crispin Vale and asked who was handling my work. Before I could answer, Aloan stepped in and tried to speak for me. Crispin looked at her, then at me, and in that brief pause, I knew he understood exactly what kind of woman she was. After that night, my life began to move in a direction I had never planned for. Crispin kept his word and brought me in for a proper audition. One chance became another, and then another. I started singing in places I had only seen in magazines or heard about from other people. None of it happened overnight, but it happened fast enough to make my old life feel far away. For the first time, people wanted me there because of what I could do, not because someone else had allowed it. Aloan did not stay out of it. The more attention my work received, the more she tried to place herself beside it. She spoke as if I owed my progress to her. She gave the impression that she had guided everything from the beginning. When I heard that she had started discussing my bookings as if she had a right to them, I confronted her directly. She did not deny it. She only smiled and spoke to me as if I were still too simple to understand how the world worked. Something in me went quiet then. I realized I had spent years wishing for a version of her that did not exist. Not long after that, I met Orson Pike. He worked with Crispin's team and handled legal matters. He was calm, observant, and impossible to impress with surface charm. He treated me with a kind of steady respect I was not used to, and little by little, I trusted him. Just when I felt my life was steady, I realized the danger had never left. Aloan could not stand that I was beyond her control. Quietly, she began telling lies about me to investors, event planners, and anyone who would listen. She said I was unstable, hard to work with, and ungrateful. She even tried to make it look like Renmere House Events had the right to manage my bookings. For a moment, I felt the old fear rise in my chest. But Orson went through every document, every email, every record of payment. He showed me exactly how she had built her lies and where they were weak. What we found was worse than I imagined. She had been using company money carelessly, promising things she could never deliver, gambling with her business and reputation. My career was not her only target, her whole life of luxury was built on lies. I paused before acting. Part of me remembered childhood rooms we shared, small kindnesses, and whispered secrets. But I had learned that protecting someone who hurt you is a choice. I decided I would no longer carry her burdens or shield her deception. I gathered the facts, laid them out clearly, and let the truth travel where her lies had once ruled. It was quiet, deliberate, and unstoppable. Her downfall happened faster than anyone expected, but it had been quietly waiting for years. The moment the investigation began, partners pulled away. Blaine left her as soon as his reputation was at risk. Friends vanished, invitations stopped coming, and the company she had controlled cut ties completely. Aloan tried one last time to blame me. She claimed I had planned everything out of jealousy and resentment. But the proof was clear, undeniable. I had not ruined her life. I had only refused to let her ruin mine. She could not see the difference. Even as everything fell apart, she believed someone had taken her life from her, when in reality she had lost it herself through pride, greed, and the desire to control everyone around her. One rainy evening, she came to my apartment. She looked thin and broken, trembling as she asked if I was happy with what had happened. I told her satisfaction had nothing to do with it. I had only ever wanted a sister, someone to share life with. What I had received was a rival. She left with tears and anger, and in the months that followed, debt, disgrace, and loneliness took everything she had built. In trying to destroy me, she had destroyed herself first. My life after all the chaos was quiet in a way I had never imagined. My music grew steadily, not because people wanted drama, but because it was honest. Every note I sang carried my experiences, and people felt it. Orson was always there, steady and calm. Loving him felt safe, like I could finally be myself without fear or judgment. We married quietly. My parents were there, smiling, and my voice trembled only with happiness. Over time, I decided to use what I had gained to help others. I started workshops for girls from ordinary families, the ones who had been overlooked or underestimated. I wanted them to understand that talent has value, even when others fail to recognize it. I wanted them to know that cruelty from others should never determine your worth or stop your dreams. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I think of Aloan. Not with anger or joy, but with sadness for the choices she made. She could have chosen love, kindness, or even support, but she chose power and control instead. She invited me to sing so she could make me small, but she gave me a stage and a chance to be heard. In the end, that night became my victory. Her plan to humiliate me turned into the moment that proved my strength, my voice, and my life could never be taken by anyone.